you tell us a bit about like Qualys and what services you provide to customers, just at a really high level, and just sort of see where that might be, suitable here in Australia? Because the same rules apply. Australia is a smaller market when compared to the US, but and I know you have, as I say, a presence here, but where do you see sort of Qualys fitting into the market, and what sort of services do you provide to customers?
I think that's a great question because the one thing that's the equalizer globally is really digital transformation. So if you look at whether it's Australia or any other country, almost every country today is really focusing on digital transformation of their government processes to help improve the life of their citizens, to bring financial inclusion, to make things significantly easier, reduce taxpayer spend on technology. They can provide more self-service. If you look at businesses in Australia and everywhere in the world, they are doing the same thing for their own businesses, right? Everybody's basically looking to focus on digital transformation as a way to differentiate themselves, right? Today, you don't necessarily have to go into a bank branch to deposit your money. You can take a picture of your check. I saw somewhere you could take a selfie of yourself and open a bank account with your phone. You don't need to go and get it there, talk to somebody and get a toaster as it used to be anymore. And so uh, digital technology is what is pushing really the limits of what we can do in terms of automation. And so um, as as a lot more of our critical business processes, data, everything is becoming digital, so are the bad guys really looking at changing their tactics, right? And so if you just look at simply with whether it's Australia or anywhere else, if you take example of a bank, right? If you were going to have to hit a bank in the traditional way, it's a lot of logistics required, lots of getaway cars, masks, ski masks, and a lot of people trying to go in and take the money. But if you look at some of the breaches that have happened, you can do a digital breach. You can actually take off
Yeah.
$100 million in an hour. And so for a lot of these criminal enterprises, they are shifting their tactics more into this world of digital just because that is kind of where really the money is. And by the way, the governments are not far behind because uh, rather than a traditional war where you have to spend millions of dollars building missile defense systems and submarines and stuff like that, it's a lot more cost effective to wage a proxy war using digital technology with a bunch of folks who are sitting in the basement in your country trying to find the holes and attack different organizations. And so, Australia really as the forefront of digital transformation, as more and more things are being digitized. I was there last year. Really enjoyed my trip and really seeing how whether it was paying for the ferry or getting onto the plane, like everything really is now being done by digital payments applications and things like that. And so you could pre-order your burger and you show up and the burger is already ready. And so um, that's also bringing a risk to the business, right? So um, in Australia, you have the enterprises are really working hard to figure out what is the best way that they can safeguard the data of the citizens, how they can safeguard their business interests, how can they can bring integrity monitoring in their business, and the governments are essentially doing the same. And that is really where that partnership comes into play when you look at Essential Aid as an example of how the Australian government has really stepped up to say, look, we got to provide a framework for businesses and governments to really focus on cybersecurity because a lot of time that comes at the end of the conversation once you've digitized everything. Um, so what kind of framework can you provide? And that's really where Qualys has been focusing last many years, including in Australia, to provide organizations and governments a way to really see what risk do they have from their digital infrastructure and a way to reduce and monitor that risk and to reduce that risk so that they can make it safer for their customers and the citizens to really conduct
Yeah, well,
business
that's a
online.
good point, because we've seen obviously a massive global shift to the cloud. But what are the advantages do you see to businesses for them to move their technology to the cloud, over traditional methods that they've used in the past?
So cloud really has been a big enabler just because of the speed at which it can allow you to
Right.
digitize. And so in the past, when digitization projects would require you to go out and get a rack in a data center and buy hardware machines and rack them and connect them and deploy software and
The good
test
old
them.
days.
Today you can be up and running with, since you can be up and running with a couple of databases and a few web servers in a
Yeah.
matter of minutes. And so in a world where everybody's trying to compete with each other faster and faster, anything that enables you to provide any digital capability much faster than somebody else is very interesting. And so the cloud really allows people to do that, and that's really been the big reason. It's not, there's a lot of debate about cost and
Yeah.
if it's cheaper to run it on-prem versus cloud, but what you don't talk about is the
Yep.
opportunity cost, right? And cloud significantly improves that part of it, so you can very quickly have an idea, lead a company, and have something up and running within a matter of days and weeks rather than months and years as it used to be.
I'd like to talk about probably what are the risks you need to be aware of, when moving to a cloud environment, because I think sometimes, Sumedh, sometimes there's the confusion between what does the cloud provide or who covers what and what's my responsibility or not. So, what do you think some of the key things or risks that people need to be aware of when they sort of move into a cloud environment?
Yeah, I think the concept of shared responsibility has not really changed. If you look at it from a traditional data center side, it was the physical security of the data center was always the responsibility of the data center provider, right? Like if you were hosting a rack in a cage somewhere, you were not posting armed guards outside to secure
Yeah.
that. And I think very similar exists in the cloud today, where the cloud provider who is providing the infrastructure has certain responsibility to make sure that nobody can blow through a wall to get inside your cage. Now after
Yeah.
that, whatever is in the cage, that is your responsibility to make sure that you are tracking, you're making sure that all of your stuff is up to date. And there is obviously a partnership there between the provider of the cloud and between the company that's hosting things in the cloud, so that you can get a complete holistic protection, right? You can have the protection from top and bottom and east and west, and you are in the
Yeah.
middle. And so that really helps you ensure that you have a full view of the risk. Because if you put a lot of security controls around your machine and all of that, but somebody just walks in and takes away the machine and goes like that's a
Yeah.
risk that you want to provide, and that's where the shared responsibility comes into play.
Yeah. And that's where Qualys sort of helps, is actually just covering some of
Yeah,
those
no,
bases. So,
like,
we're sort of talking about what they need to be aware of. Where does Qualys sort of step in and actually help with that?
exactly, because you need to know your assets, right, where
Yeah.
they are. And no company is digital, is cloud only. And so
Yep.
which means that even if you're a cloud company, you have laptops that are being used by your administrators to connect to the cloud. You have mobile apps, you have offices that have networking equipment that can. So at the end of the day, customers want to not just have silos of, oh, cloud security is different,
Yeah.
on-prem security is different, remote security is different. At the end of the day, you have a certain limited amount of resources that you can put on reducing the digital risk to your business. And so for that, you need to have a holistic view of all the different risks
Yeah.
that you have to your business from cyber. And then you can focus on which are the ones that you want to do. And that's really what Qualys focuses on, right? We're going to give you a holistic view of all the different types of risks that are coming to your environment from your digital infrastructure, whether it is cloud, remote endpoints, or on-prem systems.
And that's the thing. There is so many solutions and bolt-ons that happen these days, and that's part of the problem, isn't it? That, and they're often not talking to each other. So you do end up with sort of black holes sometimes in your business of, what have I got covered? And sometimes they're double or triple covering things and leaving gaps in other
Right.
areas. So, and to that, I was just, Tom and I, just with MurFin here, we do a lot of work in the Australian market doing podcasts and information to try and uplift, the general knowledge across the network. And I know you're doing a cyber risk series at the moment because we tuned into the last one that you did. But what are you trying to or hoping to achieve from that cyber risk series from your point of view or from Qualis's point of view?
Really what we're trying to do with the cyber risk series is that people talk about cybersecurity and they
Yeah.
forget the word risk in that. Uh, Cyber is a risk to the business. It's a business risk. And so really bringing that word in as part of the conversation is super important, because
Yeah.
as I'm sure as you talk to the CISOs in Australia, they're like, oh, I have so many infrastructure, so many tools, I have so many findings, and where do I invest my money to make sure that I can protect? Well, that depends on where your risk is. And so
Yep.
with the cyber risk series, we started a year ago, and we have had phenomenal success with people attending. It's just having a conversation around what are the critical aspects that cause risk to your environment, right? And how do you figure out where do you need to put your resources? And if you don't take a risk-based approach, we almost every enterprise today is at a place where they have too many findings, and there is no way they can actually physically fix everything. So then it becomes a question of prioritization. And so we really with the cyber risk series, we take a less of a vendor based approach and more of an open approach to conversations around what are the different key aspects in security that need to be talked about from a risk perspective. And so last time we talked about cloud security as a risk, but the idea is that if you can spend millions of dollars in cybersecurity tooling that gives you visibility, but if you don't fix the issue before the attacker gets to it, all of that $10 million was a complete waste. And so how do we get a risk reduction approach rather than just a, hey, here's some findings, good luck? That And so the cyber risk series, and this time we're talking about asset management because that's so crucial. It's really the cornerstone of what we're doing, and we have had great response because we bring speakers from the industry. We have conversations about how people are doing it, what the challenges are, and it's just more of a community conversation approach rather than just a vendor webinar. Really.
That's the key, is speak to your customers like you're looking after them. You've got a solution,
Right.
but it's actually just saying, it's almost, I look at it almost like being a doctor, like, and we
Yeah.
have a solution for you, but we need to know what the issues are and see if it's suitable, so then we can make something tailored for you, a health plan, if you like, that actually can look after your business. And I think to that end,
Right.
you recently launched like Qualys Total Cloud 2.0 in the
Yeah.
market. What have you heard from customers in the market about cloud security, and sort of how have you addressed that, or using Total Cloud 2.0 or 2.0?
I've done this for a long time, been in this industry for 20 years, and this is one thing that the industry likes to do is continuous stream of acronyms that keep coming up.
Yeah,
And so when
that's
you look
right.
at cloud
I'm not sure.
security,
2.0, 2.0.
it's like, you talk about CNAP and CSPM and
Yeah.
CWPP, and so cloud brought about a whole bunch of new acronyms. And
Yep.
I mean, so what, right? Like, I have all these issues. I have buckets that are facing in the internet. So what is that actually a risk to uh,
Yep.
my cloud account? That's really the question. Like, as an example, you could
Mm.
have a cloud account that's perfectly configured, but by the way, the credentials to log into that are on a laptop of that admin that has a malware on it. So somebody can just take your credentials and log into the account. They don't need to exploit a vulnerability. So that's when we talk about total cloud. We're saying, like, don't again get into the same trap that we had on the on-prem environment where, the cloud provide the workload is looked at differently, the misconfigurations are looked at differently, and then network is looked at differently. You need a total view of all the risk and your true risk in the cloud together. And that's where we really launched this capability called total cloud, where we are just giving a complete holistic view of all the findings, summarizing that, prioritizing that, and giving you one thing to say, yeah, I mean, we found 50,000 things in your account, but by the way,
Yeah.
only 5 of these truly are something that the attacker would care about. And that's what you
Yeah.
should focus on, because there is no way you can fix 50,000, and you should not. It's not cost effective. If I'm spending, $100 to secure infrastructure that costs me $100, that's bad business, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to say what is the priority of things that truly can cause risk, and how do I focus on that. And so with the total cloud 2.0, we not only bring your cloud workload protection and your cloud posture management, but we also bring your SaaS visibility, right? Your As a CISO, your responsibility does not end with the infrastructure that you host. If you have critical information or data that is hosted in O365 or G Suite, or that's hosted in Salesforce, a breach there is still a responsibility, and it still causes a risk to the business. And so
Yep.
you need to be able to get a holistic view of everything that you have out in the cloud, right? And cloud is sometimes a fairly loosely used term,
Yeah.
but that's really what we are focusing on with 2.0, is that it truly brings the visibility across the different cloud elements, really prioritize what is important, and brings in the view of your SaaS applications where you host data with somebody else into the mix as well to give you one clear view of what you should focus on.
I like that. And I like that you can actually help people focus on what's important. As you say, there are so many different things happening and going on all over the place that you sometimes lose sight of what's the important stuff because there's so much noise. So it's good that it can actually get it
Exactly.
down to here's the key things to focus on. And to that,
Right.
Sumedh, I just wanted to just AI. I don't know. I mean, AI is the buzzword. We talk about cloud being
Yeah.
something that's misunderstood. I mean, generative AI has made a big change in the market, and I know that when I was in the US last year, and heading over again next week to San Francisco, but I'm sure it's going to still be the buzzword, and I just see it everywhere. But how are you seeing it play out with regard to both your clients? Have you integrated any of that within the Qualys like Total Cloud or any other aspects of the business? Are you seeing that's been an impost? You've been able to use it to your advantage. I know that the dark side of the web that it's actually being used quite broadly, especially for targeting and making things like phishing emails a lot more targeted.
Yeah, I have so many things to say about that, but I think the
Good.
phishing example was a great example of basically, um, AI is being used to make phishing emails so good and so targeted. The only
Mm,
way you can detect that they are phishing emails now is to use AI. And so, in
yeah.
certain aspects of cybersecurity, you have AI fighting out AI, and the humans are just watching them with
Sit
popcorn,
back
right?
with
So,
popcorn. That's
so
right. Yeah.
sometimes you're like, there's nothing as a human that you can add to that because these sophisticated technologies are fighting each other. But
Mm,
like many other things in the industry, I think AI is a great technology that can truly make a difference in terms of how cybersecurity outcomes are delivered to the customer, and that's a key word, right? Outcome
mm,
is a key word because the end of the day, the customer really cares about the outcome, which is they want a accurate, fast and cost-effective solution for their cybersecurity needs. The customer doesn't necessarily care whether you use AI or not, but
no.
you as a vendor now have the ability to deliver those three outcomes to them by leveraging technology like AI. Now, interestingly, like we had machine learning. If you remember, a few years
Yep.
ago, everybody was talking about machine learning, and then sort
Mhm.
of that
That's
died
morphed into
down.
Gen AI. Yep.
Right. And so now it's kind of like, people are starting to talk about AI, and a lot of them, they take LLMs that are out there and just basically show you summaries and some conversation using Gen AI. And what I really feel is that the AI is the great equalizer. It's not the
Mm,
great differentiator that people think,
yep.
because with the LLMs, etc., it's equal. It's really democratizing and giving everybody sort of similar outcome if you give it the same data, no matter what vendor you are. And so the real ability and opportunity to differentiate is with your data. If you can
Mm,
have a data set that you have collected data and findings that are very differentiated from what your competition is now, you can get a very specific output out of that LLM only if you have really good quality data. And that's really what Qualys is focused on with our ability to have agents and 100 million agents and scanners out there. We get a very, very rich data set that we can provide an outcome on. The other part of it, which is where we acquired a company called Blue Hexagon well before this whole chat GPT thing broke out on the scene, is because one big way to differentiate is really deep learning, which is a key
mm,
part of AI. So you have the Gen AI, and then you have the deep learning part of AI, and deep learning is really the differentiator. So if you have a data set and use cases and processes that the customer's environment is providing you certain visibility, and now you can leverage deep learning to create models that are fairly unique and not the same LLMs that are out where everybody else is using those. That's a key differentiator, that's a key value, but that needs a lot more deeper investment in AI rather than just using LLMs that are out there. And so one such example of where Qualys is focusing our deep learning on is really, and you hit that point a little bit earlier, is that the attackers, they are a business, and
yep.
most of the attackers, they're just running a business. They have profit loss, they have HR departments, they have performance reviews. They want to be able to hack as many assets as they can in the minimal amount of resources and time. And so instead of just poking around the whole internet trying to get lucky with finding a asset they can hack, they are taking all the signals, putting in through the models, and figuring out which assets are the most breachable.
Mm,
And so the opportunity is to leverage the data set that we have to be able to give a very similar view to the customer of their own environment, to say, look, if I was looking at your environment as an attacker, here's the assets I would go after first, because of a combination of different things that are on those assets. And so you as a protector, as a defender, need to go in and make sure you fix those things first. And that's a great use of AI to be able to say, look, can I take a lots of different things that are happening? I don't necessarily know to write a rule for everything, but I have seen enough in my customer environment that I can tell you that this is a highly risky asset, or even the
Yeah.
fact that a particular asset is critical. You can leverage AI. If you have seen enough assets being marked as critical by the customer, almost every security tool is dependent on the customer telling you which asset is critical. But if you can figure out by looking at what is installed on the asset to say, look, over the last 10 years of millions of assets, we can really build a model that says why certain assets are getting marked as critical. We can highlight to the customer on our own to say, like, here's using AI, we can highlight the assets that are critical to you. So you never miss an asset that is critical. And I think this missing the asset and finding the asset is the key part of our cyber risk series that is upcoming, where we are going to talk about inventory and your broken CMDB, because you need to be able to know what your critical assets are. Without that, you don't have a security program.
Yeah, and that's sort of a good lead in you, but touched on. So you've said that CMDB is broken. Why do you believe it's broken, and what do you think needs to be done to actually fix that?
Yeah, this is my open challenge to, in the last 20 years, of
Yeah.
every single CISO that I have spoken to, not a single person has ever said that they're happy with the asset, the information they have in their CMDB,
Mm.
right? You have customers that are generally happy with certain security controls. They could say that they're okay with their patching, they're okay with their zero trust, but you ask somebody, how good is your CMDB? The answer always is that it's always outdated, doesn't have all the assets in there, it's not up to date. And so your security program can only be on the assets that are there, and the accuracy of those assets is important to actually deploy the right tools to protect them. And because of this lack of collaboration many times between the IT team, who's using the CMDB for a different purpose, and the security team, which is looking at the CMDB for a more up-to-date information, many times the step zero of security, in my mind, which is asset inventory, is broken. And if that is broken, your rest of the security program is broken. And so while there's many different technologies and many different things to focus on, we really decided to focus this cyber risk series on saying your risk of not knowing an asset is probably one of the biggest risks, because at least if you know the asset, you can deploy some measures, and maybe you didn't deploy all the measures, but at least you were able to protect it. If you don't even know these assets exist, that becomes the big challenge. And so really focus on the cyber. And by the way, Essential 8 really highlights on these basic things like know your inventory, know your assets, patch your operating system, patch your applications. If you look at Essential 8, it doesn't get into some complex AI technology that has to be deployed. It literally gets down to the basics of saying, for a successful security program, you need to be able to do these things, and asset inventory is a big part of that. And so the CMDBs are broken primarily because of the use case for a CMDB from IT team is about warranty management and asset management, lifecycle management, not about up-to-date information from a security perspective, right? And so that's where I see the opportunity for collaboration between the security and the IT teams to create more updated CMDBs that are beneficial to both teams.
Yeah, and I think on that one too, third party risk is a big one that gets missed a lot by a lot of people as well. So, what have you seen? I mean, third, fourth, fifth party risk, it just keeps spreading, doesn't it? When you look at some of these businesses, they do get stuck in their own environment and not actually aware of a lot of
Yeah,
stuff that can affect them from in that sort of third party risk.
and absolutely, and that's why I gave that example of
Yeah.
SaaS applications, right? So you
Yep.
are putting your critical data into a third party, and so any breach of that third party brings risk to you.
Correct.
Today, almost every single piece of code you write, you include open source software that is written by somebody else, because does not make sense for you to write every single thing from scratch. So to be effective, you are using open source. So that is third party risk that you're bringing into your environment. And
Yep.
so you have to be able to identify all the assets in your environment. You need to be able to identify all the software that you're running. Then you need to be able to identify which of that software is your software versus which is commercial software versus which is open source software. And so this is a big part of our cybersecurity asset management capability that Qualys provides, is the ability to collect all of the data about your assets, look at the categorization of the software, and then tie that into, is this software end of life? That brings a whole bunch of different type of risks. So that's your technology debt. I have technology debt because I haven't updated my software. And by the way, I have software that's going to go end of life soon. If I don't fix it, I'm not going to get value out of that. So if you go back to Log4j as an example, this was a huge waste of resources globally because people, first of all, with Qualys, with the millions of assets that we were looking at, we saw that 50% of the software that had Log4j in it was already end of life, that people were running. So they were not getting any patch. And people were just blindly trying to fix things and they didn't know what to do because their vendor was just saying, we don't even have a build for this particular software. So that inventory component is not just about having a list of assets. It really needs to get deeper into a list of all of the software that is installed on these assets, the ability to then identify which of these are from somebody else, and then being able to find all the risks that that particular use of that software brings to you. And sometimes the risk is a technical risk, just because you're using something that can conflict with something you have. Sometimes it's a risk that is coming from a cybersecurity perspective. Sometimes it's a geopolitical risk, right? Sometimes you don't want software developed by a particular nation to be running on your systems. And we've seen some of that happen the last few years. And so, but all of that at the end of the day starts with that inventory. So without that, if I ask you how much third-party software are you running, you just can't even respond because you don't have an inventory and you don't have CMDB that's updated.
What are your ideal customers for Qualys? So what are you looking for? If you said, here's our ideal Australian customer, what does that sort of look like for Qualys? Who's your preferred or ideal customer?
See, today a customer for Qualys is anybody who runs a digital infrastructure and has risk from cyber events. And so that's pretty much every business out there, right? So if you're not digital and you're not connected to the internet, really, probably not the right profile for Qualys. But at the end of the day, I know pretty much in Australia, every single business is fully connected, and I use an online service to get flowers delivered to somebody, right? So even your flower shops are now connected online, and so it's just a matter of and a question of how high in their priority is cybersecurity, right? And so, as you always see, the national banks in Australia, the larger commercial banks, they tend to really be the early adopters of risk management because that's in their DNA, right? Risk management is in their DNA of these organizations. And so when they start to look at financial risk of fraud, etc., digital risk becomes a key part. And a lot of times, today people are getting too many breach notifications. So there is a bit of like, everybody's getting breached. So, what's the point? I'm not changing my provider. But the organizations who are primarily now digital, a big risk that they really are worried about is the risk of unavailability of their digital infrastructure because of a cyber attack. So if you get attacked and your stuff gets encrypted and for like 4 days or 5 days, you're not able to process transactions as an online retailer or as a bank, that's a huge loss, even compared to fines that you might have to pay out. And so we are seeing, we're seeing that organization in Australia, the government, the banks and retailers are really taking cybersecurity very seriously, and they are really looking at partnering with Qualys. And that's why, when we, wanted to commit to the market, we really took the effort and time to deploy a Qualys platform within Australia so that we are a partner to ensure that it's per government requirements, all the data that is for Australian organizations stays within Australia, and that, it is not something that goes out of Australia. So we took a lot of steps there to commit to the market, given the commitment that we were seeing from the market. The commitment to cyber risk management is growing increasingly, and essentially it is just a starting point, and there is a lot that is going to come and happen as we move forward, as you can see in the news, a lot of questions around who has access to what data and how do you deal with breaches. But we are pretty excited to see that the market continues to focus on managing risk in their digital infrastructure. In like any other market in the world, I think Australian market is also very sensitive towards how they are looking at the business, how they are spending, in which areas to reduce the risk. And so we have extremely positive feedback from our customers in Australia on the Qualys platform and how it is helping them look at risk rather than just a whole pile of findings, which today is too much.
What does the sort of next 12 months look like for Qualys, both here locally in Australia and around the world? What have you got maybe next sort of 12 to 24 months that we can sort of look forward to sort of coming out from Qualys?
Look, the new cyber strategy really focuses on how to reduce the risk of compromises to the citizens' data, to the organizations. And so, we really look forward to, just like we did with Essential 8, you can go to Qualys and you can get an Essential 8 report of all your infrastructure to see how you do against the suggestions that they have and against the mandates and requirements that they have. And I think it's the same with the new changes that are coming. Is all of them really point to that same direction of saying, really focus on understanding the risk, managing the risk. And what's interesting now is more and more in the traditional model of where private businesses did not have to worry about defense and having a missile launcher in their parking lot to protect themselves from an attack, right? Because the government took care of that. But in this model of digital transformation, you have large organizations, large banks, large utility companies that are essentially, they're national importance, even though they are private organizations, and they need to do a lot of work to safeguard any breach, because that breach could mean, airports or utilities or citizens' data being compromised. But they have to do that at their own expense. Right? Versus in the traditional model, you're paying a certain amount of money to the government and then they're taking care of that. And so we're moving into this digital in this new era of cyber warfare and cyber criminal enterprises, where organizations have to figure out that they have a certain amount of national responsibility because of the type of data infrastructure they host, even though they are a private organization, and they need to do a lot of different things to protect for national interest, but at their own expense. And so I think these new strategies for 2030, as well as essentially, are really steps in that direction to ensure that organizations in Australia are really keeping pace with ensuring that they are not, becoming sort of the place where cyber criminal enterprises are going to compromise with the infrastructure.
Yeah, excellent. That's great. So, mate, I think we've hit the end. You've done well. I'll give you a 9.5 out of 10. We'll work on doing a 10 next time.